two Super Bowl contenders? Of course they are.
How are the Cincinnati Bengals wasting Joe Burrow? The Cincinnati Bengals are doing exactly what Joe Burrow wants them to do. You know how I know that? Because Joe Burrow told us what he wanted them to do earlier this offseason, and they capitulated to almost all of the things that he, quote-unquote, demanded. How are they wasting his talent?
Put me in a very bad mood, honestly. All right, well, we had a preseason game last night. We had Monday Night Football. We had Joe and we had Troy and we had Rich Eisen afterwards.
How about the Open?
Everything is going in the direction of ESPN, which we love. And Rich joining us here on ESPN Radio, noon until 3 Eastern time, beginning on September 2nd. And the first thing that he was back a part of last night, Cincinnati Bengals and Washington Commanders, which is basically the holdout bowl that we saw last night between Terry McLaurin and Trey Hendrickson, and now there's all kinds of rumors about Brian Robinson Jr. and whether or not he gets traded. So the Bengals win the preseason game. Trey Hendrickson remains out, and here is the latest update from Laura Rutledge last night, ESPN Monday Night Football reporter, of course NFL Live, had this to say about the latest with Trey Hendrickson.
I spoke to Trey Hendrickson just a little while ago. He reiterated that guaranteed money is the holdup in these contract negotiations with the Bengals. They agree, he said, on the average salary. They agree on the years, but Hendrickson believes his play warrants more guaranteed money than what the Bengals want to pay, even though he turns 31 in December. Now, Hendrickson also confirmed that there has been no progress here, and he is prepared to sit out if needed. It's also worth noting that there's been no progress toward any trades either. That hasn't even gotten close. Hendrickson wanted to make it very clear, though. He said, "I don't feel sorry for myself." His quote was, "I'm a very blessed man, and I trust in God's plan here." He also pointed to the Bengals logo on his shirt and said, "This place means a lot to me. I'm still wearing this logo proudly," and said he just wants to do the very best he can to help this defense out.
Okay, so there's a lot here to digest, but let's first get the actual understanding of the definitions of what Laura is saying as it relates to the NFL sack leader over the last 2 years who plays on a team with a quarterback that's a top 5 QB in the league in Joe Burrow. When Laura says they've agreed on the years and they've agreed on the money, just not the guarantees, explain how that could happen, that they could agree on all these things, but not the guarantees.
Well, it's about the organization's commitment from a cash flow standpoint to Trey Hendrickson long term. If you're agreeing on the years and the APY, then the only thing left to discuss is how big of an escrow check ownership has to write upon signing, because that's what happens with the guaranteed money. So without going too far into the weeds, anytime you see a player's total guarantee in a contract, every NFL owner has to write a check to be put in escrow for that amount. So from a cash flow standpoint, it can get a little bit dicey in terms of an organization's commitment. If you think about how expensive this offseason has been for the Cincinnati Bengals, paying Jamar Chase a ton of money, paying T. Higgins a ton of money, big signing bonuses, big guarantees, then all of a sudden you can understand why the Cincinnati Bengals would be a little bit reticent to dole out yet another big guarantee. But to that, I would say this. You have a window with this core of players to compete for a championship. If you're not willing to go all in for this group, then who will you go all in for? That's the question I would pose to Mike Brown and General Manager Duke Tobin. If you're not willing to push all your chips to the middle of the table for Joe Burrow, who is literally out there in the second preseason game fighting with second and third string receivers in order to try to get better. If you're not willing to go all in for that dude, then who are you willing to go all in for? It makes no sense how the Cincinnati Bengals have handled Trey Hendrickson to let the guarantees into year 2 and year 3 of a contract extension be the sticking point for a guy that's led the NFL in sacks over the last 2 years. Makes no sense.
And you knew this was coming. You knew that this was something that you needed to budget for, or that you needed to have a finite decision on prior to this season. You knew that T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson were going to get paid. And if Joe Burrow, who is the face of your franchise, is publicly campaigning for the 2 receivers, then you knew that there was going to be a tough decision on the table there. And you either protect your quarterback from himself by saying, hey, this is what you want, but the vulnerability on this team is the defense. And if we remove the anchor of that unit, the NFL sack leader, from the equation, we're not going to be competing for a championship. We're going to continue to be on the outside looking in when it comes to the playoffs. If they don't make that decision for him, then they need to make another decision and be proactive about moving on from him or trying to figure this out earlier. The fact that they have gotten to this point in the offseason and we're still here talking about guaranteed money with Trey Hendrickson, I can't fathom what they're doing, especially for an organization that has to get off to a fast start and historically has not.
Here's the thing I also don't understand, because the structure of the deal is the sticking point, right? The guarantees.
Yeah.
The Cincinnati Bengals broke their own rule this offseason when they signed Jamar Chase. Outside of quarterbacks, they don't like to guarantee money beyond the first year of a contract extension. They did that with Jamar Chase. They gave him $74 million guaranteed at signing. So you already broke your own rule. You broke your own precedent. How would you accept, how could you accept a deal that doesn't do the same thing if you're Trey Hendrickson, if they've already done it for Jamar Chase?
Yeah, I mean, this is the
that makes no sense.
Like, this is great information and great opinion. And all of this is about one person. It's all about Joe Burrow. Like, that's the most interesting part of this, is what is his reaction? Why did he say what he said about the wide receivers? How is the team going to be structured? The Bengals, as you mentioned, et cetera, in terms of if you're not going to go in for this guy, who are you going to go in for? Here's what Burrow had to say about the Trey Hendrickson situation.
Yeah, I don't know. I think historically these deals with us have gotten done closer to week one. I signed on the Thursday before the first game. Jamar's started to pick up, that week before last year too. But I think historically the way we've done business is, that tends to pick up here in the next 2 weeks. So we'll see.
Okay, so he's just assuming it's going to get done. If you watched any part of that game last night, when the starters were in, that defense was so horrific early on by the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, they allowed right off the bat a Deebo Samuel run for 19 yards, a Chris Rodriguez Jr. run for 40 yards, and then a Jayden Daniels 14-yard touchdown. All on the first drive of that game, the 4 plays that Jayden Daniels played. And I believe, and Joe Burrow is not at fault for what I'm about to say, I believe that there has become such a narrative around hyping Joe Burrow up, similar to the prime of Aaron Rodgers' career, that you look at him throw the football and you're like, he's got to be better than Brady and Manning in the case of Rodgers. Oh my God, Burrow's got to be better than Lamar and Josh and Mahomes. He's just not. What's going on right now with the Cincinnati Bengals is awesome for Joe Burrow supporters. Because what's going to happen? Their defense will stink. He'll throw the ball a ton. His numbers will be through the roof. They'll be playing from behind. They'll score a lot of points, and you'll get your MVP vote. This is a blessing for all of those people that want to die on the Joe Burrow hill. Congratulations. You should root against Trey Hendrickson getting signed. Joe Burrow got what he wants. He got the 2 receivers. He's going to score a ton of points. He's an awesome quarterback. The narrative works. You have to root against Trey Hendrickson signing if you're a Joe Burrow fan.
But don't you want to see Joe Burrow compete for a championship if you're a Joe Burrow fan?
Because no, well, that's out the window.
But that's the marker of greatness, is whether